Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we bring you day 446 of Russian invasion into Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Olexiy Arestovych, and Mark Feygin, Russian opposition politician, well-known blogger, and lawyer. Usual thanks go to our supporters. This time the shout-out goes to John Afseth, Carolyn G., Olga Lewis, and of course Bill S. Thank you guys for your kind support of our channel. And here we go, day 446. Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feygin Live. Today is Monday, May 15th. It is already 4 minutes past 10 in Kiev, same time as in Moscow. Our apologies for technical delay. Olexiy is traveling this week, and we need a little more time to set the connection, make sure everything works. So day 446, Olexiy, hello. We have 70,000 already watching us, 20,000 clicked the like button. Thank you, friends. Please continue sharing links to that stream in your social media. Do not forget to subscribe to Feygin Live, to Olexiy Arestovych, in the description to this video, and of course to the Privateer Station if you are listening or watching that in English. Without further ado, let's talk about the main news. You probably saw the article in Washington Post or saw the commentary about it. It was published with links to that famous Pentagon leaks documents. And it's not entirely clear, but they're pointing at Prigozhin, who was trying to supposedly negotiate with military intel of Ukraine to give them up the positions of Minister of Defense of Russia, and in return exchange that for Ukrainian military withdrawal of some of their troops away from Bakhmut. By the way, last year we talked about different people in Russia who could or indeed leaked information about positions of Russian troops, that this information was always being provided. So do you think Prigozhin could have gone for that exchange? I can easily suppose that he would go for such an exchange of data. And I would also say that the most valuable information is not about positions, but about intentions. Intentions, though, however, is much more difficult to check. That's why people who can report about the enemy's intention actually are much pricier, much more precious than the others. But regarding Prigozhin, we understand how he treats Russian military. Look at all his statements, and the peak of it was the shoot-up of the photos of the Russian military command by his Wagner troops, and his screams at Shoigu, Gerasimov, that they need ammo. So it appears that he treats army as mud, dirt under his feet, and he's definitely reciprocated from the other side, from the military. So, okay, Olexiy, thank you for this opinion, but there's another angle. There is an opinion that this whole publication is probably a psyop from the United States that was planted to push Prigozhin further into the corner. Today he was actually arguing with some of the Russian officials, and he was barking back at them, saying that those who are leaving Wagner for Russian military should be getting criminal prosecution, and that should not be allowed. So I would say, from my personal opinion, I don't care. That would be fantastic if these guys will continue fighting and would just cut each other's throats there in Russia. It helps Ukraine if they are fighting. And Americans might indeed have added a psyop there. What do you think about it? So, you know, if Prigozhin gets assassinated as a result of this struggle, we'll benefit from this as well. Can you tell us more? Well, there'll be not less trouble on the Russian side. It'll just, the main leaders, the faces will change a little. Because right now, whoever is in charge of Wagner and in charge of military. They have slightly different tasks. Military wants to de-emphasize Wagner and to lower their capabilities, and Wagner doesn't like that. So they'll continue the struggle regardless of Prigozhin's presence. And as for the publication as the leak, there are too many steps in that statement because that Prigozhin was negotiating for information. That the source told another source, which is an acquaintance of their source. That doesn't quite work like that. That's easy to dispel, and Prigozhin can basically pose a question: whom do you trust? Do you trust our enemies or do you trust us? And even though this situation will not add more love to Prigozhin in Russian army, but it is difficult to prove and to do anything about him. Do you think the army can just kill him on one of the occasional barrages and say, well, he died a hero in the front? No, I don't think that is an option because he is definitely being protected in certain circles. Who else? I mean, Alex Putin or FSB? No, no, no. I think he is closer to military intel, the one that's missing the letter intel, the I from the intel. Now, because Wagner is based on their basis. So it is a mixed story there, and who benefits from what, because military intel is still part of military. FSB, my impression, is somewhat above the fray, or maybe somewhat supporting and propping him here and there, but it's hard to tell. And we don't have facts. All our suppositions is we shouldn't go there too far without information. And Russian situation is usual Byzantine politics, and they keep fighting. There's a lot of inner bickering. Today, the leading aspect is infight between Prigozhin and military. I'm sure there'll be other options and other venues for fighting later. Not everything gets into the media stream. The fact that Wagners are contacting with our military intel, sure, yeah, I can imagine that. We don't know, but we can presume anything. Anything can be presumed, so let's not go too far in that. Okay, let's start our polling today. Do you trust American sources mentioned? Uh, and this is the poll so far. Results 36% say yes, they can be trusted, 60 plus percent are saying no, they cannot. And in regards to Prigozhin, Olexiy, everything seems to be escalating in the conflict with Prigozhin because their statements are getting harsher and harsher. Mark, his destiny, I don't see any bright future for Prigozhin. His destiny is pretty clear from me because he is undermining the higher level of command. So you think he's done with? Well, not exactly fully done yet. For a while, this meteor will be burning bright. Wonderful. So chips and beer, popcorn, right? We have 150,000 with us already. Before we switch to the map and situation on the front, there was another interesting piece of news today that Lukashenko showed up after staying invisible for several days. And today he was dressed in uniform and he was pretending to be involved in some activities, even though his outlook was not too great. And he was checking the readiness of Belarus air defense systems as the aftermath of the 4 downed Russian aerial vehicles. So do you think he was shown on purpose that he is still alive? I don't know if you saw that video, but my impression was that he definitely does not feel well. He actually has one of the hands bandaged. Well, Mark, I think it's strange to check your own air defense systems after the fact that the other country's air defense system shot down the planes of your ally. What's the logic? Yeah, that was they presented. All right, And the other thing that is a little confusing to me is that in Moscow he had the right hand bandaged, and today he had the left hand bandaged. I don't know what explanation to look for it. Is he got a wandering infection, or are they getting catheters through different hands? But something is definitely off with him. We understand that, of course, since there became a notable note in public opinion that he might be ill, he needed to show up, so he definitely gathered his wits and dressed up and came in front of the cameras. Um, Remember Erdogan when he did not feel well? He's not exactly a dictator like Lukashenko, but on the second day, when let's call him authoritarian leader, he had to show up on the second day and in a video and show that he's alive and doing well. So the countries that are based on the leaders whose personal physical presence is important, authoritarian, authoritative leaders, um, to different degrees, they still need to show. The moment they disappear, the system might start falling apart, and in this case, they need to project their well being. So, otherwise, there may be dire consequences to them and their rule. So, here's Lukashenko a few days after, dressed in a military uniform, and came out in front of the cameras. By the way, Alexei, he's about 68 years old. He's not a spring chicken. And that definitely is a tempting factor for his surroundings, for masses. If he is really feeling weak, he might not be too dangerous. And yeah, he needs to continue projecting his presence. So that's your opinion, right? That's why he is coming out in front of the camps. And that he needed to show up 5 days after 5 day absence. Yeah, I think it was just the communications about his absence were reaching the peak level that they have no leader. So he needed to get back on that horse and show that they do have a leader. Well, if you ask me, it's always better sooner than later in this case. But anyway, let's talk about Turkey before we get to the map. There will be a second round of elections in Turkey. I also want to say all the conversations about democracy from the point of view of Russia, we're not talking about Ukraine. Ukraine is a rather stable democracy. For Russia, it is unimaginable level of democracy where the head of the state, who is accused of being authoritative, actually slipped into the second round and did not win in the first one. This is unthinkable level of democracy for a country like Russia. I understand quite a bit about Russia and their processes. For them, this is utterly unacceptable. So all the talks about Erdogan's authoritarianism and all that, you can divide them by a certain factor. He is definitely not too hard of a leader, in my opinion, too authoritative, I think, just comparing with Russia at least. I'm not a specialist in Turkey, Mark. There are people who understand more about it than I do. And these people are saying that they were mistaken. They did not expect such a result. Most experts were drawing percentage in a different, in reverse, basically, that Erdogan would be trailing. But I'm not an expert, so most experts already were proved wrong. And it's difficult for me to go into that. All right, let's see what will happen, and let's take a look at the map, at what's unfolding there. First of all, of course, Bakhmut. A little slower, but the spreading apart of the pincers, the ones that we talked about, the flanks around Bakhmut. The territory controlled by Ukrainian military is growing exactly on Bakhmut direction, and many people have a question: is it already a counteroffensive, or is it too early to talk about that? Well, first of all, I have a military joke about spreading the flanks, but I am holding myself about from saying it. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm being cursed about all these salient jokes. Yeah, I'm sorry. I grew up in barracks, so things come to mind. As for Bakhmut, this is not counteroffensive. At best, we can consider it to be one of its elements. But the counteroffensive is the event of the operative level, and actions around Bakhmut, they're not exactly tactical, but they're operative tactical level. They're one step down, one step lower. And counteroffensive will be an event of operative strategic level, so actually two levels above. So they're not exactly comparable. It's like 10 and 100. But this is a very important action, and it's both symbolic capital about pushing back near the main concentration of Russian efforts, and this affects the moral factor, and that relates to everything else as 3 to 1, the morale of your troops. And second, we are destroying a very battle-worthy group of our enemy, which actually is better equipped with artillery shells and other materials, unlike many other parts of the front. So we'll see. We'll see who wins. Our side, as you sharply noticed, continued to spread their pincers further apart, and their troops are still continuing to push in Bakhmut. This is not exactly by the book, because when the pincers are being pushed away or cut off, you should hold. You should not be pushing. But it's up to them. So there are also additional moves that today became more pronounced to the north and to the south of Bakhmut. You can see it on the map, the blue areas. And other parts of the front, General Command also said that Avdiivka, Vuhledar, and Marinka were rather hot today. The enemy activated themselves in those areas and were trying to storm our positions. They were the spots of the highest intensity. It doesn't mean that nothing else is happening, but other parts are not being active, but these were the hottest. And okay, what about Kremenная, Svatova? That group is a bit quieter and more tired. They actually had a good aggregation there. They were waiting for some success near Bakhmut, and were getting ready till it's liberated, so-called as they call it in Russia, or basically captured, occupied, as we say in here. And they were waiting for that moment to continue motion, but they bumped into our defense line, and they wasted a lot of their capability, and now they're staying pretty dormant. They either don't want to do any offensive maneuvers or don't have a capacity, and I'm thinking it's probably mostly the capacity issue, because they were moving quite a bit of their troops to Bakhmut as well. So I don't think they have enough forces to continue offensive up north. All right, 186,000 are with us, 60,000 click the like button. Do you know that another piece of news in Lugansk, in the center, because of that explosion, 7 people are wounded, all hospitalized. 4 men are in heavy condition, among them a 17-year-old boy and temporary administration representative Igor Kornet, Minister of Foreign Affairs, so-called, of that area. Yeah, that guy is well known in Lugansk, with a biography, with experience. I think the 17-year-old was a collateral damage in this case, and I feel sad about that. But all those guys around Cornet, many things happen. Even the hair dryer can explode like that. Oh, hair dryer? That was a mighty hair dryer. Things happen. They surprisingly start to blow up much more often. those hair dryers and other equipment. Well, that's the destiny of collaborants. Whenever you work with the occupants on the territory, your destiny is pretty short. And then household equipment or vehicles, they start breaking apart and, remote from the gates or other things, they just start exploding. Of course, usually it's the vehicles, but sometimes even barbershops, apparently. Yeah, barbershop is a very dangerous place. You know, the place where the most manly men work with big beards. Why? Because these spots are pretty dangerous, and that's what happened there. The real Spartans in barbershops. Okay, okay, let's go on. No, I do respect barbers. Oh, we do respect them too. We do, Mark. Yeah, just a strange place where the fan exploded, but okay. Do you know that special representative, ex-ambassador of China, I'll pronounce his name as Koei, because otherwise there'll be some other dirty jokes about the way it sounds. Um, he's planning to visit Ukraine, and Chinese representative in the United Nations also came out and said that negotiations about Ukraine should not be expected to come too soon. It may take at least a year to get there, but still the vector from China and China's sympathizers is definitely obvious. They are leaning towards negotiations. How do you see that? What can you say about it? Mark, I think that Putin's defeat, the defeat of Putin's group, is not even a question. This is an inevitable process, and one capacity or the other. Then the next question, whoever is planning strategically, how will it be concluded? How what will be the fallout of it, and what will be the post-defeat situation? And everybody wants their own part of that pie. China wants that pie too, because they're solving two tasks: to not let the West become stronger and to not let Russia to be defeated utterly, because they do need Russia at least as in opposition, as additional opposition country to the West. So China wants Russia to be anti-West, or at least neutral, or at least subtly anti-West. The West, of course, would want Russia to be joining the ranks of the pro-Western countries as the result of all these events here. So China, of course, wants to pose themselves as the intermediary, because intermediary always gets certain benefits from the conflict. And a year ago, there were thoughts about China giving or not their weapons to Russia. They decided not to, and they won't. But being an intermediary, that's more interesting for them. That's a guaranteed place at the table where the resources will be divided and already are being divided. So this is part of their activity. Now they will be making circles around United Nations, Russia, United States, Ukraine, and we'll be talking about the peace talks everywhere. But I'm thinking he might face a very straightforward answer like Zelensky gave to Pope, that we don't need that. He probably won't answer that in the same manner to China as he did to Pope, but the message will likely be very much the same. All right, so you think that in the nearest future we should not be expecting news in this regard? No, no, I think this is a typical diplomatic activity, um, just a typical contact group. You know, we had one working since 2014 till 23rd, almost. So, all right. And we'll leave that news to the end. There is another one. Our voting continues, our poll. Do you trust the article of American media about Prigozhin's traitorship? Because it's too long to describe who did what, who leaked what, and for what reasons. So the question is simple. Do you think Prigozhin is a traitor or not? and that's how it will be presented. And 35% are saying yes, that they do think he's a traitor and they trust that media input, and 65% are saying they do not. So at least in this chat, Prigozhin is somewhat defended. A couple news about arms supplies to Ukraine. United States is not planning to deliver ATACMS missiles to Ukraine, despite the Britain supplying Storm Shadow missiles, said the White House. United States have not changed their decision about the new equipment, neither about the F-16s, jet airplanes. So John Kirby reaffirmed that, answering the question if the position of Washington was changed in the light of new statements made by Western Europe and new arms and matters discussed by Zelensky. And Kirby answered no. There were no further commentary on this question. Pentagon confirms that they did supply 31 Abrams tanks to Germany for training of Ukrainian military. Macron also came out and said that French Air Force is ready to start training Ukrainian pilots on their vehicles. And the last element of this question that I'm preparing so long-windedly is that out of $46 billion that were approved by Congress, there's only $6 billion left, as reports Politico, and they're saying that the funds for Ukraine already allocated will be up in July, and there probably will be another allocation after. Also, Hungary blocked a package of 500 million from Europe to Ukraine, and they did not behave well. Yeah, so Mark, Hungary blocked this support from European Union and then immediately came out and said that they do support the peacemaking effort by China. And I'm suspecting these two news are connected. They appear too close one to the other. And it's kind of weird for Hungary. This is too obvious, right? Mark, we're tired of Hungary. I actually have to correct here myself. Not Hungary as a country, but their ruling coalition with Orban, um, whose actions still need to be checked and rechecked about how the funding for the nuclear station was spent, how the decision was made, and how much money was made by whom in the Hungarian elites. Um, But this story and that position of Hungary being so sharply anti-NATO and anti-European, this will blow back on them. Last week, the ambassador of the United States didn't even pick words with Hungary. They were already in a shouting match. So eventually, there will be a fallout from these positions. And they're posturing and playing as if they're for peace and so objective and so of a different point of view. You can be three times for peace, but you are a member of two blocs, European Union and NATO, that collectively made a different decision, and you are, for whatever reason, continuing to stay in this company and you're working against it. Today, France and Ukraine signed a declaration that France is supportive of Ukraine joining NATO. Before that, we signed similar documents with Germany and Britain as a result of President's visit. And it was a big milestone event for us. So if these countries are signing that declaration, that's worth its weight in gold. And with that collective position, it's very curious to hear Hungary positioning themselves as an opposition. It would probably mean that their ambassador on that NATO summit may be very much like Lavrov on the last United Nations Assembly, and sit there and survive all the spits and pokes by other fellows. So it's interesting how long will they be able to play this counter position. As for military supply, Alexei, Do you can you elaborate if it comes on time? If you guys are getting enough supplies? Because for a while you've been commenting that there is some misery happening with the supplies in relation to counteroffensive. Mark, misery was happening not in relation to supplies in general. Misery was happening in assortment of what I was expressing my dissatisfaction about, because the real situation about the tempo and the nomenclature is known to maybe 3.5 people in the whole country and the same amount on the other side. What I was upset about is the fact that there is certain nomenclatures that are not being supplied to Ukraine, and such as jets and longer range missiles. I have no doubts that we will get them eventually, but when, that is still not clear. On this stage, according to certain reasons, they're not being supplied. And I suspect there might be a general agreement or some signals or something that basically they're trying to probably preclude China from supporting Russia. And that red line might not be exactly in relation to Russia, but more in relation to China and Russia. And the West might be considering that supply of ATACMS and jets might push Russia into China's arms a little harder at the moment. And one of the main tasks of the West is to not let Russia to jump and join ranks with China completely. So I don't know how they calculated that and how long-range missiles and jets, what effect do they think they have on this position, but I suspect this is one of the factors that they may be considering. All right. We've been live for 31 minutes. Russian financial monitoring has made a comment about freedom of Russia, and they call it as Ukrainian military group. And they're calling them as extremist and terrorist group detachment. I actually visited this detachment when I was in Kiev, when I was in Ukraine. According to their invitation, I actually visited their base and their training facilities. And it's funny that Russian media is calling it Ukrainian detachment, when frankly it is not. It is just located in Ukraine. Yes, Mark, we have to highlight this. This is a Russian military group located or situated in Ukraine and is a part of Ukrainian military effort on the front, but it is comprised entirely of Russian citizens. So this is Russian forces in in joint action with Ukrainian forces. As Normandy Neman Group was, for example, a part of Soviet Union effort fighting the Nazi Germany in the Second World War. So these guys are Russians. They're fighting among our troops, but yeah. So how can you comment on this news? Oh, I would comment that these guys in Russia who called them terrorists, they're just super slow and probably dumb. Because 15 months after this group is fighting actively on the front, they're coming out and calling them terrorists. That's a little untimely. And you notice that most of the people, why we're insisting they insist to cover their faces, because they are Russian citizens. There are only two spokespeople they have who openly opened their faces and made statements on behalf of the Legion, but the rest are still covering their faces because they have relatives, families, and other contacts in Russia that can be attacked in order to hurt them. So they're hiding their faces for that reason. And I would personally think that if there'll be any repercussions about any of their family members, if they're discovered, it'll probably cause even more members to come join the Legion and fight Putin's regime. Okay, and let's talk about Armenia now. Armenia is saying that we are supportive of Russia, but we cannot cross the red line against sanctions. And he is saying that the president of Armenia is saying that he is not against Russian citizens moving to Armenia if they want to, but they still would not cross the red line of sanctions. So this is in regards to his statement made on the after 9th of May, where he actually was there in Kremlin, basically serving as bodyguard to Putin, and he's being criticized. Not only him, also Tokayev, president. They both being attacked, and they have to come out and make these statements. So how would you address that? Because Armenia was tricked by Russia several times. Regardless of their stated support, they continued to abuse the trust and didn't really help Armenia much. Well, his statement is rather logical. They are interested in working with Russia, but they don't want to cross the red line of sanctions. And I would suggest all those presidents who were on Red Square in Kremlin to start thinking about sanctions. Because from my feelings and senses, and I don't ask me where do I get them from, but all these persons that were there with Putin on the tribune on the 9th of May parade, they very likely will face some blowback and some sanctions after, because Yermak Makful Commission is still working, and they know, of course, about the gray schemes. And it's not just the presidents of these countries who know how they make money in the current muddy waters. There are other people who are aware of that and who are following through. So there'll be more to come. All right, there is one more news related to that. In regards to Mikhail Saakashvili and Georgia, we know that Moscow one-sidedly removed the limits for visiting Georgia, removed any limitations for the air communication between Russia and Georgia. And of course, there were statements from Washington saying that if Georgia will allow open air transport between Russia and Georgia and more trade with unsanctioned goods, then there'll be sanctions against Georgia implemented. So Georgia needs to think it twice. And posing as loyal friend to Moscow through agreement to support that air transport activity and removing all limitations for visiting, all the visa limitations. So for me, it's obvious that the current leadership in Tbilisi in Georgia is definitely pro-Russian leadership. They, for whatever reason, are moving towards Russia. It's not only connected with Saakashvili, it's their overall strategy. They are on a course to get much closer to Russia. And people are commenting that Saakashvili is still in prison, that no positive motions are done in his destiny. And I know for a fact that Western officials tried to resolve that matter with Georgia. They refused. And the situation is just getting deeper and worse, more troublesome. So, and not only about Saakashvili. Well, current Georgia under current leadership is probably the first candidate for sanctions, just by the sum of all things that you mentioned, to not repeat that again. By support of Russia, by their action in regards to Saakashvili's destiny, whom they are killing, in the way they are ignoring the demands of the West and their requests about Saakashvili. They are still stating that they want to go and towards European Union and NATO, the organizations that they don't listen to. So it's a strange story, right? You want to go into that house, but you don't want to listen to the opinion of the owners. So I think it's just a matter of time until they get slapped with more sanctions. You know, I would say here that President Salome Zurabishvili, who is trying to publicly state that she is not part of that leadership, that she is trying to oppose and insist on 4 months transport limitation, she is actually just saying that. She's not doing anything. She's just pretending that she is somewhat concerned. So this is some game, I guess, they're playing. The government is playing a loyalty to Moscow, and president is playing her upsetness with that course. but none. But she's not doing anything. We don't know details, but I would indeed reaffirm the word game. Mark, it does look like a game that they're playing here. Or play. One of them is playing a bad cop, another a good cop, and you know my position. It's very stern. I want them to finally find themselves deeply sanctioned for all that behavior, to start thinking about the consequences, because what they're calling independent politics is nothing but toying with Russia and trying to get some favors from Russia at the expense of their future and the lives of their citizens. And the benefits are only maybe possible for their leadership and nobody else in Georgia from that behavior. Yeah, I think also that their chances to join anything Europe are more and more ghostly and ephemeral. So, do you think in the future summits in Europe, EU or NATO, there'll be some blowback for them? I don't know, Mark, if there'll be invectives there, but they definitely are not achieving any progress. They will not. Because I'm observing their populace, some people, and some of them are upset, others are not. It seems like their society is also divided. I actually talked to some Georgians today, and they were complaining that they have a lot of propaganda based on not a friendly position towards European Union, and that propaganda is being fed to the nation at large. So they indeed have a large portion of society that is not favoring Europe and anything West. So, all right. We've been live for about 41 minutes. In regards to our poll, do you trust American media statement about Prigozhin's traitorship? Yes, 35%. No, they don't trust, 65%. We have overall 48,000 people who voted. And we concluded at this. So far, Prigozhin lives by Russian measures, and he avoided the accusation of traitorship, at least by this unscientific poll. What I also wanted to note here is that we continue the campaign of donations to Kalinovsky detachment. There is a person, Alexander T, who donated $2,000 and then donated $5,000 in Bitcoin, and we are awaiting additional confirmation. But as a result, I suspect he will be the one getting the flag with signatures of the command of the battalion, and I will add my signature to that too. And we'll send that flag to his address as a big thank you for support to that detachment, because we know that they do need more equipment. God knows how well Belarus events will unfold. They may get busy after this war in Ukraine is over. And our next stream is on Wednesday, right, Olexiy? Yeah, Wednesday's fine. He's traveling, so sorry for the quality of the picture, but he still finds ways and places to talk to us. About 270,000 watched us here, about 70,000 watched on Alexei's channel, 85,000 clicked the like button on my side, and a large number on his. And please continue sharing. If you are watching that in English, do not forget to subscribe to Privateer Station, and we'll see you on Wednesday, right? To continue our conversation about all news Ukraine. Thank you, and see you later. Thank you. Good luck. See you on Wednesday.